last but not least is Mr. Thomas Bologna, the chairman and CEO of Response Genetics. And let me think, how can I put it this way? If you need one of the pioneering figures in biotechnology, he's sitting in front of you. He's done it all with big companies, small companies, established companies, entrepreneurial companies, doing work in New York area, San Diego, Boston, and then in LA. He has a degree in biology from New York University and also an MBA from New York University. He started his career at Warner Lambert and Becton Dickinson, and then got lured by the biotechnology siren, came to San Diego in the early 80s, and became the chairman, president, and CEO of GenProbe. And GenProbe, of course, got acquired recently by Hologic for $4 billion. But Tom shepherded the company through its IPO, and after that, it got sold to Shogai for how much? About $2 billion? $100 million. And then after that, started a series of entrepreneurial companies in San Diego and Boston, including Curix and Ostix, and he can talk more about that. And then got recruited in 2011 to run Response Genetics. Response Genetics is one of our more mature molecular diagnostics companies. If you haven't heard of it, it's a rock throw away from the USC Health Sciences campus. Was formed in 1999 to do molecular diagnostics, and they became publicly traded in 2009 or 8, and then Tom got recruited to run it in 2011. It has about 109 plus employees and generates about $17 million in revenues from sales and partnerships with companies such as GlaxoSmithKline, and has a number of kits, companion diagnostic kits, for different types of cancer, in addition to providing services to companies that are doing clinical trials. Thank you, Tom, for being here with us, and he's going to share his views on the market, how it looks like, and the opportunity and the challenge.
Thanks. What I'm going to do, excuse me, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Response, and the underlying themes you'll see. It was clearly a turnaround company. Some of the things that Bob said would happen in 2013 affected all of us, including Response. And at the end, you'll see, why we did certain kinds of things. But the underlying theme is center of excellence and growth, by any way you can get to growth. What we do is we do companion diagnostics right from the get-go. We try to find the right therapy for each individual patient. The bottom line, from my point of view, is the science works today. This is not like it was when we started GenProbe, where it was all a real technological challenge. If you got through that, the commercialization aspect took care of itself. That's no longer the case. It's changing very, very dramatically. From my point of view, that the commercialization aspect is probably more important because the science has advanced so much. Next slide. We're a publicly held company, so we have to give you the forward-looking statement. Next one. This is what we do. We're a highly specialized company. We only work on solid tumors. Our goal is to be the absolute best at solid tumors. So when a patient has lung cancer, colon cancer, what have you, you will want that test from our facility. And it's not because we are like everyone else. In fact, we're very different. It's the way we do it. For example, FedEx is different than airborne. If you want something to deliver right away, you go to FedEx. What we do is the same. It's the absolute best. We literally have medical physicians that actually, with razor blades, will take the cancerous tumor right out of the slides. So again, solid tumor, content-driven, oncology-focused, and the development and sale of molecular diagnostics. And the reason we say patient-centric is we're not a company that says this is a given technology, now how do we exploit it? We say, what is the information that an oncologist needs and a pathologist process so I can get the right answer in the shortest period of time to provide the right therapy? Again, we're headquartered here in LA. We're a little over 100 people. The key highlights are we're doing around 20 million a year, and you'll see how we change that around. Significant growth in our DX business. We built our own sales force where we sell to oncologists and pathologists. We completely rebuilt that over the last year and a half. Growth at any price. We acquired a company last year, and I'll tell you a little bit about that, which is the only FDA-approved test. And then last but certainly not least, we do have a pharma business, and we just won a fairly sizable award, about a $5.5 million award from the NCI. And frankly, it was pretty easy to win because of the way we do things. Next slide. We have two businesses. We have what we call our pharma business. We did a lot of work for GSK, we still do it, which actually resulted in GSK being our second largest shareholder today. They put some money to the company right after I got here. They own about 15% of the company. And then we have our DX business, which is where we sell to oncologists and pathologists. Two parts, our molecular and then our tissue of origin test, which I'll tell you a little bit. That's the company we acquired last 2013. Next slide. This is a strategic move we made in 2012. We did a lot of work. About 50% of our business was with big pharma, GSK, and some other companies. It's a good business, but it's a very lumpy business. And you really can't build shareholder value on that. So we made a conscious decision to build a DX business and not worry so much about the what I would say the core pharma business. And next slide. In fact, if you go back 2 slides, go back once more. You can see our DX business, how it's been growing. So that's why you can see that change. Let's go back to the other slide. This is just for the ALCHEMIST. What this is a study that's NCI related, where we were picked as the only CLIA lab in the United States. We will process all samples. It'll be around a $5.5 million award over the next few years. All these samples are coming in that we will be processing, and it's related to lung cancer, because clearly the way we do lung cancer is pretty phenomenal, and I'll explain that in a bit. Next slide. And this is the way we do it. We look at specific types of cancers, and we say, what is the information that an oncologist or pathologist need, and we build a suite of tests around that. What's interesting, if you look at 2013 and 2014, we introduced a thyroid, we introduced brain. Why did we do that? Simple. Life changed in 2013. These tests get reimbursed. Prior to that, we just popped out tests like you can't imagine. And it really did work, because these tests really add value. But you don't get paid for them anymore. So you just can't do it, unfortunately. Next slide. And this will give you an example of how we do it. Here's like our lung panel. A whole bunch of tests. And each of those tests has clinical significance that an oncologist will need. For example, you look at, a good test would be ALK. We do ALK in 2 ways. Pfizer has a phenomenal drug, it's called crizotinib. It works extremely well for about 5% of the patients. And a lot of people that have lung cancer that did not necessarily smoke. With ALK, you can make that determination. And to show you how it all changed, we introduced this test in 2010, and the drug crizotinib didn't even come out till a year later. So we had all of this work that we did. Then the FDA decided that you need an FDA-approved test. So they took an Abbott test. It's called the FISH test. We have that here. It's a good test, but it's really not that good, to tell you the truth. So what happens is all of a sudden this drug is introduced, and they can't find the patients anymore, because you can't pick them up with that test. What we do is we're the only company in the world that does it. We will test every patient with an ALK FISH, and if it comes up negative, we'll reflex it, which is a fancy way of saying we'll retest it with our own proprietary LDT test, BCR-based test, and we're finding samples that other people can't. So it's the quality of what you're doing. It goes back to the underlying concept of is, how do we do something better than anyone else? Content-driven and very specific. Next slide. Now, what about the business of healthcare? This is something that we do different than, let's say, a LabCorp or a Quest. Unfortunately, the way the healthcare system is going, no one's making any money anymore, including the physicians. So we set up, at great expense and great time, what we call a TCPC marketing program. TC stands for technical component, so think of that as bringing in the sample and processing it. PC is the professional component. That's when our pathologists would read it. So what we did with the latest technology, the latest and the greatest, we built a system. So we take all this information, we process the sample, we digitize it all. So all digitized, and you can look at it in almost 3 planes, in the Z plane we call it. We built our own secure portal. All that information is transported over to a physician at a hospital, and that physician actually does the professional component. So we share, we call it revenue sharing. And this is a huge part of our business. Again, it's adapting to the new laws of healthcare. Next. Another example. We all know next-gen sequencing is pretty hot today. We cut a deal with Knight Labs. because they had a pretty good panel, which we think is the best in the industry for lung, which is exactly our sweet spot. So again, we process samples that way. The next slide. So here's the way we do it. Now, a few people here talked about the cost of healthcare. The fact of the matter is, what everyone really believes in healthcare is you don't have to pay for anything, because they expect someone else to pay for it, and justifiably so to many degrees. So, but how do you work for that? We now know that the government is going to decide what tests you do get and what tests you don't get. So this is what we do. This is our lung test. We call it a driver panel. EGFR, ALK, FISH test, and ROS. Then of course we reflex off. Under the NCCN guidelines, we can turn those tests around in 5 days. We can give you very, very good results that are better than anyone else can, or you can even on a TCPC component. 25% of the time, that's all you need. So from a cost, turnaround time, that's the only way to go. Then if they turn up negative, then we'll reflex it off, and we'll use our NGS panel and some of our expression tests. So again, we sort of triage this thing, because every patient is treated differently depending on the physician that's treating that patient. So again, we're patient-centric. Next slide. Then, what happened in 2012, 2013, this industry started changing. Next slide. We bought a company, it's called PATHWORK Diagnostics. They had 2010 sales of $1 million, shot up to about 5.8. $61 million worth of capital put into it. Medicare reimbursed and complimentary content. Again, we could get paid for it, it's good stuff. We paid $1.2 million for the company. 500,000 shares of stock and 200,000 in cash, plus we collected the receivables, and I think we collected almost $500,000 just in the receivables. So we're at the right place at the right time. It's the only FDA approved test. The mistake this company made is they went for FDA approval. We do LDTs. So we picked it up. We took a big risk. Can we really take that thing and move it down to LA? We did it. We put it in our facility here in LA, and we started selling on February 8th of 2014. Next slide. We have strong intellectual property. Our key patent comes from USC, which is really where the company started, where we have the patent for taking the RNA out of paraffin. So again, good content. Probably where I disagree with the panel a little bit, you can't worry about the IP as you used to do it in the past. It's just not what it used to be. It's not like you have a phenomenal test and you're going to get this long stretch going. It's just not that. You've got to be first to the market, you've got to build quickly, and you've got to utilize your capital the most effective way possible. Next slide. So this is the final slide. Today, I believe both the science and the business of healthcare have taken on incredibly new importance, especially in 2013. It's no longer good enough to have another Me Too product or a slightly better product. It has to be a transformative product, because this stuff just costs too much money. Secondly, growth and scale must be achieved. You cannot do it without scale. Good example is our company now, we're building up our back office pretty quickly, because just to do the reimbursement, to get into all of that, going back and forth with patients and going back and forth with the blues and everything, it just takes a lot more work. It's not simple. Strategy is important, but execution and appreciation for what is needed to get the job done is the only way you're going to succeed. And I just can't stress that enough. That's the one thing in all of companies I've turned around or built, it's always the same thing. It doesn't make any difference how good your strategy is. If you can't execute, it's not going to work. And in today's environment, you have to appreciate, like Bob does, how the market has totally changed. You can't extrapolate the past anymore, look to the future. Today's market dynamics are changing. Reimbursement changes by the day. Cost of drugs are going up. The government influence is profound today the way it was years ago. And of course, the advancement of knowledge, which brings me right back to the last slide, which the rest of the group said. I mean, this stuff really works. The science works. There's no question. So today, how do you get this good stuff that works and commercialize it pretty quickly? And last but certainly not least, I'll predict that pharma and diagnostics will become increasingly integrated like a lock and key, but it's not going to come anytime soon. The markets they're very, very different. Other than one or two big pharmas, you can see the difference. Because remember, pharma wants to sell a lot of drugs, And in diagnostics, we want to determine what drug that you need. On the other hand, if one looks at it logically, you could say there's no reason why people should pay a lot of money for these drugs, provided they really add benefit, and you don't give it to everyone. So it's a total transformative change. And we'll see how this plays out over the next few years. But the reason molecular diagnostics, from my point of view, will clearly win in the end is for one reason. I mean, this stuff really does work. I mean, when we built GenProbe years ago, I mean, I remember I had 30 people in chemistry, and we were doing things that were unheard of. Today, that's routine. So, the good news is this is a great industry. The better news is it's really going to help patients. The challenge is, how do you commercialize it and make money for everyone? Because if you can't make money, you can't stay in business. And that's from my point of view anyway.
Thank you, Tom.